Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think we're all set. Sorry, I don't know if you can see me. I'm kind of like out of the camera range. Can you see me?
Probably over there.
I can't see you.
There you are.
Okay, there you are.
This is Olivia. Everybody, welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Allie Hill. She is the founder of Sound Advice and a company surrounding consulting women entrepreneurship and women grassroots startups. I'll let her take it away. She is amazing, and I look up to her. She's such an empowered, inspiring woman who gives amazing advice. So we are so excited to have her today. But yeah, Dr. Hill, I'll give it away to you if you want to start and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I couldn't be more excited to be connecting with all of you today, even if it's from afar, especially because when I graduated from Tufts in 1998, the last century, this did not exist at Tufts. The coming center you're sitting in, entrepreneurship, certainly we at Tufts. And so I am so excited to see the evolution of how Tufts is recognizing that entrepreneurship is critical to learning, it's critical to our communities. And my belief is actually that entrepreneurship is the key to women's political, economic, and social equality. So being here with you today is really an incredible honor, especially being an alumna and loving to talk about women in entrepreneurship. So I'm going to get started with that. I'll tell you a bit about myself as part of this talk. And I also want to know that Olivia did send me the questions that many of you had submitted. So thank you for that. And I'm also going to weave these into what I'm saying. However, if at some point you have questions, let's make sure that we answer those, because I'd love for this to be a conversation as much as it is a chat or a talk. So on December 4th, 2021, it was a Saturday morning, just like this one. I was standing on a stage with about 18 other women as we were about to give our TEDx talks. And the curators of the event asked us to kind of circle up on that stage and asked each one of us to give a piece of advice to the other women standing on the stage. Now, you can imagine we were all super nervous, even though we had practiced. TEDx talks are the kinds of things where you want to make sure that you're feeling confident, because whatever comes out of your mouth is going to be the thing that lives in posterity as your TED Talk. So they went around to each woman asking her what her advice was. And when they came to me, this is the advice that came out of my mouth. And I think it's really apropos for this morning. The advice comes from a poet. His name is Antonio Machado. And his advice is, I'm going to say in Spanish first, and then I'll say it in English. Caminante, no hay camino. Se hace camino al andar, which means traveler. There is no road. You make the road upon traveling. Now, why did I start in Spanish instead of in English? Well, because at Tufts, I was a Spanish major, and I lived in Spain my entire junior year. And so it may seem like my road from Spanish major to entrepreneur is one that was maybe not typical or winding or makes no sense to some people completely. And so I wanted to start there because there you are at Tufts. You are forging your path. It's not a path anybody can forge for you. It's not necessarily a path that's going to be linear. You're not going to say, what I do today is going to be what I do when I'm 45 years old, right? Which is where I'm at this point. So I wanted to start there as a Spanish major at Tufts University to show you that where you start now is not necessarily where you're going to go. So from that perspective, there are certain things that I think you absolutely do need as an entrepreneur, whereas you don't need a path somebody set forth, and you don't necessarily need an academic course of study. What you do need are these three things. The first thing that you need to do in order to be a successful entrepreneur is to center yourself in the narrative of your business. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that you need to think about what your values are, your beliefs, your interests. Because if you decide that your business is going to be about what anybody else tells you is the hottest thing, the best thing, the thing that you should be doing, I guarantee you that you are at some point going to feel that this is inauthentic, that it's boring, that you don't enjoy it anymore. And that is not something that is sustainable, and it's certainly not something that is scalable. Centering yourself in the narrative of your business is critical to your success. And as one of you asked me in one of your questions, what sets you apart from competitors with similar service and products? Well, one of the things that sets me apart working with entrepreneurs and founders is that I am always cognizant of what I am bringing to the table, which is different than anybody else. I'm a sociologist. My expertise in sociology is in gender and emotional intelligence. I can guarantee that the majority of business advisors are not PhDs in sociology. It just wasn't the path that most PhDs took, nor was it the path that most business advisors took. However, I see this as my UVP, my unique value proposition, or my USP, my unique selling proposition. That I centered myself in the narrative of my business, that I work in ways that feel authentic to me. And in that way, I think that is what leads to my success. The second thing that I think you do need to do on your journey to entrepreneurship is to play your own game. Now, as many of you know, there are tomes written about business, about best practices, of the way in which you can be successful. And what I need you to do is to think instead about success as being defined by your best practice, not by what somebody else says success looks like. It's extremely important. Again, going back to that idea that there is no path, that the path that you create is the one that evolves from your learning, from your belief in what is best for your business. So I do a lot of reading, and there is a fabulous book called Freedom is an Inside Job. And it was written by Zainab Salbi. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. She started Women for Women International. And she speaks in this book about how after a few years of being the head of this nonprofit, she found herself in a horrendous position, which I never want any of you to be in. And that position was, she said she felt like she had the crown on her head and shackles around her feet, because what she had created, she no longer loved. She did this to help women and children in war-torn countries, and somehow had evolved into being a fundraiser. She was not talking to women. She was not talking to children. She was not going to the countries to give any sort of solace or advice or support. What she was doing was spending her time raising money. And that is why it is so important for you to play your own game, to make sure that what success looks like for you is what you are doing. And to that question that you have given me, what do you consider your greatest success? I think my greatest success is following my head, my heart, and my gut around what I want to do for my career. This wasn't anything anybody told me I should do. It wasn't something that I felt I had been working on since I was a young child, and that I was destined to do it in a way that felt constricting. In fact, it was just the opposite. It was an evolution. It was something that I came to over time when I recognized that after working in philanthropy and working in the nonprofit sector and working with the government, that none of these things was going to get at my personal and professional end goal, which was political, economic, and social equality for women. So this was really a journey. I did not come out of the gate thinking this was what I was going to be doing. So my greatest success was always following what felt authentic to me, which I know can sound, very privileged. And in many ways it is. However, it's also a mindset. It's a worldview. It's your saying, if something is important to me, I am going to make sure to pursue it. And from the perspective of pursuing what feels good, you had also asked me, what's been your most insightful failure? And I think for me, my most insightful failure was making sure that I was not defining success by somebody else's definition. I'll give you an example of something from my business. So last year I had started something called Click Club. Click Club was a group of women entrepreneurs and founders who I convened to read books together. And so we were going to read books, and then we were going to meet and we were going to discuss how those books, which were not business books, by the way, they were books about women's lived experiences. And we were going to discuss how the learning in those books was going to help us in our businesses. So this is what happened. I gave everybody the dates for the entire year ahead of time. I gave them the reading list for the entire year ahead of time. And I said to them, let's read the book. And if you don't have time to read the book, no problem. I created an executive summary, which went into our Slack channel. And this is what happened. I would get emails from the women saying, I read the book and I loved it, but I can't make the meeting. Or I would get emails from the women saying, I didn't read the book, and so I feel like I don't want to come to the meeting because even though you've given me that executive summary, I don't feel like I have enough to contribute. So in myriad ways, even though they had paid for the whole year, right? So if you were defining success as having participants who are fully paid, I had those. If you were defining success as the women who said, I really enjoyed the books, Allie, thank you for bringing them into my life, I would have been defined as a success. However, I realized the way that I defined success was when the women came to the meetings, when the women came to talk about the books, because really and truly what I wanted was to talk about the books, right? That's why I created it to begin with. And when they didn't come, for whatever reason, when I had 45 women signed up and maybe 10, maybe on a good month would come, I had this moment where I realized that I defined success as participation in the discussion. And I didn't feel successful. In fact, every month I was nervous. I was texting people the night before. I was terrified of having an empty room. And I wasn't feeling successful with this endeavor, even though by somebody else's measures, financially, interest in what I had offered, you would have thought it was successful. But for me, it wasn't. So I would say from that perspective that my most insightful failures have been when I have said, does this feel successful to me? And if not, why? Not, does somebody else define this as a success or failure? So I think you're starting to see a theme here, right? I believe that when it comes to entrepreneurship, it has to be about you, because you are the founder, because you are the CEO, because no matter who else comes and goes in this venture, the anchor and the foundation is you. And from that perspective, you asked me, what advice do you have for young women who are interested in starting their ventures now? The advice that I would give you is threefold. First, figure out what it is that you really want to put your heart and soul into. What is going to feel meaningful to you for quite some time, right? Is it a good? Is it a service? Is it a mix of good and service? Is it digital? Is it offline? Is it something that you can scale really big, or have you decided that scaling really big is not actually your definition of success? right? So that first piece of advice is what feels meaningful to you. Now, the second piece is, what do you think will sell to other people? Because I'm sure we've all heard the horror stories of the person who thinks, well, because it's meaningful to me, clearly it's going to be something other people want to buy. We cannot do Field of Dreams here, right? If you've seen that movie, I know it's kind of aging me on that one. In the movie, he builds the field and he says, if I build it, they will come. Well, unfortunately for all of us who really feel passionately about something, that's not the case. So after you first decide on something that you feel that you could really stick with, make sure, part two, is that other people are interested, right? Do a little bit of market research, pilot your ideas, have conversations with other people. The thing that's amazing about Tufts is you have so many opportunities to convene people, to ask them their ideas, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's the professors, whether it's people at the X college, wherever, you have a lot of people who can help you, and take that help. It is not the rest of your life that where you will have opportunities like this one. Seek out the smart, amazing, thoughtful people around you and ask them some questions. And the third piece of advice I would give you at this point is, if you don't have any sort of background in business, or if you haven't taken any entrepreneurship classes, take a few. You can also, of course, go to your local small business association, and there is tons of stuff on the internet. But you're at a university where they can offer you resources. Start to understand what it looks like. Think about what your business infrastructure is. Think about what technology you might need, your tech stack, as we call it, right? Think about how you're going to capture data, so you'll know empirically whether or not things are going in the direction you want them to go. And think about what it looks like for you to be the face of your business. Does that mean you need to work on some public speaking skills? Does it mean you need to do a little bit more practicing of negotiation? What does it look like for you to learn how to walk through the world like an executive? Those are the things that I think that you need to be thinking about at this point. And that goes also to your question about, what is something I wished I knew when I was in my 20s? What I wished I knew when I was in my 20s was that the thing that I was going to do was something that I didn't need to have defined by the time I finished college. Look, I knew that I wasn't going to be a Spanish teacher, right? That I was not interested in being a classroom teacher. However, I had no idea where my love of language and culture and connection and understanding differences and heterogeneity and being inventive was going to take me, right? I was very involved at Tufts in the Women's Center as well. And I wrote for the Tufts Daily. And I don't know if any of you has heard of the Tufts Feminist Leadership Alliance, but that is something my friend Andy Friedman and I started when we were seniors. I knew I had all of these interests and passions, but I had no idea how they would manifest. And as I said, I have a master's degree in public administration with a focus in nonprofit business management. Now I own a for-profit consulting firm. So I think what I wished I had known was, it is not only okay, but I think it's something as an entrepreneur that you need to have, which is that air of possibility around you, that you look at the things you are doing and you say, this is something that I am going to use someday, but it's not what I am going to do. And it is certainly not who I am going to be, right? That is something I think is super, super important. I just read a quote this morning that I thought was apropos. Daniel Pink said this. If you haven't read any of his books, I highly recommend them. He's really a genius. And he said, doing is a form of thinking, right? He said, I don't write these books because I have it figured out. In fact, I write them because I'm trying to figure it out. The writing is actually my process. So doing is a form of thinking. So what are the things that you can be doing right now, right? so that you will be thoughtful about what feels great. Your question about what motivates you to keep going when times are tough. I really appreciate that, because when we don't have a passion for something, or we're not intrinsically motivated, right? We can feel like this is getting really hard and I am going to step away. So for me, the things that motivate me when things get tough are really 4 things. And these are actually the keys to intrinsic motivation. The first thing that keeps me motivated is purpose. I have a sense of purpose with the work I do with women entrepreneurs and founders. I really believe that supporting them is going to change our country, if not our world. The second thing that keeps me going when I feel things get tough is I feel mastery over what I'm doing. I really feel confident that what I'm doing is helping, and that mastery helps me keep going even when something comes in my way. The next thing that keeps me motivated is autonomy. I feel capable and confident in doing this work. I feel like I have an impact. And when I am feeling thwarted by a particular situation, or maybe a particularly difficult conversation with a client, I feel the confidence I have in myself to do this keeps me going. And the last thing that keeps me going is progress. I need to see that whatever my goals are, whether they're financial goals, whether they're goals to help a certain number of women, whether they're to do a certain number of talks this year, whether it's to sell a number of my e-courses, that I see progress. It is so important, especially when you have a big business, that you give yourself ways to measure incremental change. That is what is going to help keep you motivated. Now, your last question of what was my aha moment? By the way, I love the idea of aha because my initials are AH. That's just something I'm always laughing at, because I'm like, oh, aha moments for Alio. So what was my aha moment that sparked my passion to start Sound Advice? Sound Advice Women is one line of business in a larger consulting firm my husband and I started in 2007. And I started Sound Advice Women in 2018 after having had a very high profile interim CEO job here for a nonprofit in Denver. And what happened after that, they had been our client. I stepped out of our business for 10 months to go in-house to help them lead through a difficult transition. And what happened afterwards was a number of women came up to me and said, hey, we saw that you did a great job in that turnaround situation. My friend is struggling in her business. Would you help her? Or my friend is struggling with her board or in her nonprofit. Would you help her? And at the beginning, I thought, well, I'm a sociologist and I'm a management consultant and I don't really do one-on-one work. But if they're interested in taking a chance on me, I will take a chance. And so at the beginning of 2018, I opened Sound Advice Women in doing one-on-one executive advisory. And so the aha moment wasn't necessarily something that was a firework. It was an extension of the type of work I was doing. And somebody asked me if I would be interested in helping in a way that I had never considered helping before. And over time, what I found is that I really enjoy the work. However, what I also found when it comes to one-on-one work is you can't scale it. There are only so many hours in the day. There are only so many women I can help on their businesses. So over time, as I said, I started Click Club. And then I started a small group program called The Circle. And now I also have created an e-course helping women who are solopreneurs become CEOs and scale their businesses. So it wasn't a lightning bolt. It was really an evolutionary process. It was incremental. And always, I was making sure that it felt good to me. It was that head, heart, and gut moment. When it comes to the biggest challenges in entrepreneurship, I think that they arise when we feel that we are not authentic, that we are not taking the calculated risks that we need to take because some other voice in our head is telling us that this is not our place, is telling us that we can't do this. And again, another fabulous book written by Sonia Renee Taylor, The Body is Not an Apology. She says to us to remember that the voice in our head is a voice of love. And if the voice in our head is not of love, it's not our voice. So I like to give it my own spin, which is do not confuse where you hear that voice with its origin. If you are hearing a voice in your head that is not a loving voice, that is not a voice that believes in you, it's not your voice. And so I'd like for you to reject it. Because if you start listening to the voices of others that have somehow infiltrated your self-concept, that is actually going to be any of our biggest challenge on our journey, is going to be when we do not trust ourselves, when we don't center ourselves in the narrative, when we're not playing our own game, when we're not taking those calculated risks. My biggest piece of advice is to follow what feels exciting, is to make sure that you have the skills that you need to keep advancing you down that path, to always have a group of people around you. This myth of the lone wolf entrepreneur and genius is really a myth. We need one another. Find that group of people who is going to help support you on your journey, and recognize that there is no wrong way to go. The path is yours to create. Thank you so much for having me, and I'd love to hear if you have any questions.
So I guess now we can open up to questions. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask to Dr. Hill?
The room is on mute. You guys are now on mute. I don't know. Okay.
I think we have one question right here in the front, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Ellie Hill. My name is Quina. I'm a junior studying in international relations and entrepreneurship at Tufts. Really nice to meet you. So yeah, I just kind of have a quick question. So you were mentioning about, because for me, I'm minoring entrepreneurship, and one day I'm thinking about, having my own company, but not sure how that's going to look like. But you brought up a really interesting point about, just start thinking about what are some of the skills that I need to improve. Just imagine myself being an executive of a company, what are some of the skills that I need to So for me, this might be a little bit personal, but I'm really indecisive. When it comes to decisions, it's really hard. And I think for someone who is going to be the executive of a company, she or they would have a really strong, determination when it comes to a big decisions or a small one. So I was kind of wondering if you have any tips on how I can or we can work on that. It's really specific, but yeah, I hope you can provide some insights on that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. This is a fabulous question. And even if it feels specific to you, I can promise you, you are not alone in feeling like it is hard to make big decisions. So here's what I would say to that. I am a big fan of what I call, and what many people in consulting call, the go, no go. Okay. And the go, no go is a list of questions that you ask yourself or attributes of a prospective client. What it does is it kind of operationalizes a little bit what can feel like a really hard thing to do, which is make a decision, right? It takes away some of the uncertainty of, well, but they have this, and what about this? And last time I did that, right? It's extremely difficult when you're not creating some sort of a boundary or a framework on how to make decisions, because undoubtedly you will be influenced by where you are in that moment, a conversation you just had, somebody who gave you their opinion. So to move away from any of those more, I don't know what to say, like ephemeral pieces of decision-making, concretize it, right? Make it something that you are approaching a decision with a rubric, with a set of questions that you are going to ask yourself or others each and every time. This gives you a level of consistency so that you are saying, this is what I do. Every time I am assessing a potential opportunity, I am asking the client these specific things. For example, does this client have the money to invest in my goods or services? Right? Every time. So you're not worried, well, this one doesn't, but maybe I could give them a discount, but they're my friend, or they're my sister's brother's uncle's cousin, right? Do they have the money? Another question might be, do they need my services at a time when I can deliver them? So if you have a client who says, I really need you in April, and you say, well, my April is booked, you don't have to kind of make yourself crazy. You know that if they have said this must happen in April, and you know that you do not have time in April, then it's a no-go. Again, getting you out of that, well, should I and can I and maybe I'll, right? So giving yourself a set of questions, that's about a client. Thinking about an opportunity. You know, am I passionate about this opportunity? Yes or no? If yes, what will I need to do to get myself prepared for it? If no, for some people, that if I'm not passionate, that's a hard stop. That's a no-go. For other people, if I'm not passionate, however, will this opportunity teach me a skill I really need to have? Even if it's not my most favorite thing right now. Yes, then I'll do it. Or is this work going to be done in an industry that I've always been interested in? And even if the work itself is not my joy, I am excited about the opportunity to make an inroad into that industry. So I think by giving yourself a set of criteria, a set of questions, and making sure you stick to it each time you are in a decision-making moment, you can move away from concerns about your own ability to make decisions because you've almost surrendered it to this framework that you've created. So really, you're still in the center of that narrative, but you've taken the kind of ambiguity in that moment out of the equation. You guys are on mute, so I don't hear anything if anybody's talking.
This is Olivia. Again, I'm kind of off camera. You can't see me right now, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question personally. So you mentioned briefly earlier about making sure that you're the center of your endeavor, empowering your passions, your ambitions. And we've spoken about this a little bit, and I've heard you in other talks talk about prioritizing your time, prioritizing your energy. For someone like me who tends to be a little anxious, and I think also like we're conditioned as women to like set that aside and to be like yes men, to say yes to everything, and trying to be that lone wolf as you spoke. How can, like, what are some, maybe not even tips, but you mentioned a lot about quotes or things to help us set aside the anxiousness, empower our time, empower our energy, and empower our passion to put ourselves first?
Sure. So I have to be nerdy sociologist for a minute and talk just briefly about the fact that many of us who were socialized as girls into women were taught to prioritize others' needs over our own, right? Whether this was explicit or implicit, right? Whether it was you should be nice to everybody, you should be friends with everybody. If somebody needs something, it's your responsibility to step up. And how that manifests as we get older, especially in an entrepreneurial environment or in any sort of an environment where we are feeling responsible as a member of a community. Our instinct, unfortunately for us, our first instinct might be to do what people need of us rather than what we need from ourselves. So my first suggestion is to remember that if you have been told a narrative about you that is not actually authentic to you, question your first instinct if it is not feeling aligned with your head, your heart, and your gut, right? So if somebody's saying to you, you should be doing these things. Oh, yes, I should. No, I want you to ask yourself that second question. do I really want to do this, or am I being made to feel like this is something I should do? And I'll tell you why I want you to do this, because I want you to build a new habit. And again, science of habit formation. You have to do something consistently for somewhere between 60 and 120 days in order for you to change the habit. So when you are asked to do something, I want you to think first, right? Okay, yes, I should do that. I want you to kind of critically look at your own response and say, wait, was that me responding, or was that my gender socialization? I know that sounds like a funny way to think of it, right? But was this really what I wanted, or was it something somebody wanted of me? Now, if the two are aligned, if it is what you want, then please, by all means, go ahead. But if it is something that you don't want, I think it is important to practice and have at the ready a response, right? So that you're in an emotional moment, you're not necessarily going to be coming up with the exact proper or perfect verbiage. So practice. So practice saying to somebody, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. At this time, I cannot participate. I cannot do what you're asking of me. You don't have to give a reason why, by the way. They're not entitled to that unless you want to give it to them, right? If it's, I cannot do this because I have no time now, is there flexibility on the date that it's due? Because I would be interested if I could get it to you in about 6 weeks, right? So sometimes there is a way for you to basically do what is being asked of you because it feels meaningful to you. But maybe it's just the timing is off. Practicing ways, really and truly, whether it's with a friend, as I said before, we all need our circle, whether it's in the mirror, whether it's with one of your professors, practice saying no in a way that feels aligned with you, so that you don't feel that every time you are being asked to do something, you do it, right? And I love to tell this story all the time. Years ago, my mom worked with somebody and she taught her, her name was Toby, and she taught my mom, Roberta, the most important phrase. Okay, so this is one to remember. Every opportunity is not an obligation. I'm gonna say that again. Every opportunity is not an obligation. So I think when you are presented with an opportunity, you can be grateful for it. And you can also recognize in that second moment that it is not an obligation because somebody has presented it to you. And I think from that perspective, creating those boundaries, right? Olivia, maybe it's using the go, no go we were talking about with bigger decisions in these micro decision moments. Maybe saying to somebody, you know, this sounds interesting. Let me get back to you in a couple of days. And then you go back and you look at your questions and you make your go, no go decision. So it's not that you feel obligated to answer them in the moment. It is absolutely positively okay to say, I need a little bit of time because this sounds interesting and I need to make sure it will work. The person I would hope would be thankful that you're being so incredibly mindful and thoughtful. And you know, this reminds me of a fun Tufts story. So my class at Tufts was the first class at Tufts University to have email all 4 years. So I'm really dating myself now, right? We were the first class. And we used a system back then where we had a lot of function keys. And the function key that we used to not send an email, right? So now we have drafts, right? But back then that wasn't what it was called. And you had to hit Control and the letter O, Control O. And my friends and I had this joke. Well before anybody was talking about cyberbullying or digital citizenship, we had the Control O, which is if you're feeling heated, if you're not sure what to say, if I don't know feels weird, Control O, don't send it. Give yourself the power of the pause. I believe Maria Shriver did a whole talk about that years ago, the power of the pause. Give yourself time and space so that when somebody's asking something of you, or you're asking something of yourself, that you are not feeling under the gun to answer them. Remember that Control O, the power of the pause, and that every opportunity is not an obligation.
Okay, we have another question coming in.
Sure.
Hi, Dr. Hill. I'm Maya. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated what you said about how our traveling is creating our road and how there's no road to take. And I was wondering if you have any advice about your time at Tufts and studying sociology after, about accepting failures, either in school or outside of it, and how you think that that's an important, perhaps, part of the journey.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, a little bit of a joke. So I've been an alumni interviewer for Tufts for quite some time. And my friends and I, who all interviewed students, would always talk about this kind of post acceptance depression that we were all falling into because none of our students seemed to ever get it, right? And we would laugh about it. And, I once said, I think if you get into Tufts these days, you've invented a country, right? Right? I'm giving you this little preamble to say, sitting in that room, you are already extraordinary. You have committed yourself, whether it has been to your studies, to community service, to helping others, to learning, to growing, to inventing. You are in a place that has already said, by the nature, to be frank, of its exclusivity, right? Was it 17,000 applications for 1,500 spots this past year? That you have something to offer that they want to help you shepherd, birth into the world. So I want you to start from there, to recognize that being there already shows that you are worthy, that you are able, that you are an incredible human being. You were incredible before you got to Tufts. And they saw how incredible you were. And they knew that they wanted to have you as part of their community because they knew how much you would contribute. So, starting from there, let's talk about the kinds of things that can happen when things don't go your way. Obviously, you are also, all of you, extraordinarily able students. And there might be times when things feel hard, or there might be times when you don't do as well in a class. And here is what I will say about that. This journey that you are on is really an incredible amalgamation. I'm thinking now of the amalgamates. I love Tufts a cappella, by the way. It is an amalgamation of everything that you have done. It is not about one thing that worked or didn't work. I know it can feel glaring to you if something isn't working out the way that you wanted it to. However, it is not going to define you. One bad grade or one missed opportunity or one conversation with a professor that makes your gut twist afterwards, that's not going to define you. It is all of the pieces that will form your journey, right? Just using that path analogy, right? One stone is not a path, right? You have to move on from it to keep moving forward. Gosh, I'm taking this analogy forever, but you get what I mean, right? So what is that next right step? Not what is going to be your end goal, because sometimes when we're in a moment of paralysis or frustration or fear, we can't see that end goal. What is that next right step? I think that next right step can get you out of whatever funk, whatever paralysis you might feel, recognizing that none of us is defined by a single moment. So if you can contextualize and kind of box that moment, right? I had a client who called me the other day saying, I didn't get these 2 clients. She was upset, she felt, and then when we deconstructed what happened, we realized the failure was not in not getting the work. The failure was that she didn't ask those right questions at the beginning. And some of the work she never should have even bid on because it wasn't right for her or her business. Right? So when you're even looking at where the moment of breach was, it wasn't in feeling badly she didn't get the work. After we talked for an hour and a half, and sometimes this stuff takes time, she realized that had she been a little less opportunistic and a little more boundaried on what she was willing to do, she never would have bid on the work in the first place. So it wasn't a missed opportunity. Really what it was, if anything, it was a waste of her time to have worked on the proposal. And now she's working on a stronger go, no go, because she doesn't want to make that mistake again, because it took her away from other work. Because there is, if any of you studied economics and heard the concept of opportunity cost, right? Opportunity cost is the thing that you are not doing when you are working on something else. So again, contextualizing what actually was the failure, boxing it, taking that next right step, and recognizing that none of us is a singular moment in time. All of us are the sum total of everything that we have done and accomplished.
Thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have today. If we could give Dr. Allie Hill another round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and your amazing empowerment and advice. I think we, as a conference, are going to transition again, but again, thank you so much for being our keynote speaker for our conference. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.